So, you know, it's a challenge, but it's one that we're working on. And if we also sent out, I mean, we sent out a blast email to the poll workers. We sent out a blast email to all the elected officials in the city, trying to just get people to come see the information that we have. For example, I don't know if you would know this, but if you go onto our website, if anybody that's interested, you can type in your address, and it will tell you where your poll site is. And it will print you up a Google map by either walking directions or driving directions, depending on your neighborhood and how you want to get there. We're not finding that people are really taking as much advantage of that kind of stuff as they can, and especially when poll sites have to be changed. And when I say have to be changed, I mean have to be changed. Believe me, we do not change a poll site unless we have to. And it's usually an Americans with Disabilities Act requirement that the location is not sufficiently accessible. So I know there was some hands up over here, but I have two hands up over. Go ahead.
And I just also wanted to add, I've been at the board for six some odd years. Mike, our executive director, is all about transparency and going into the community, very grassroots. So we're glad to be here with you, but we also know that you're all essentially ambassadors for your community. Let me know so that way we can. Mike is more than willing to go to your civic organizations, your block parties.
She's always volunteering me for stuff.
Because he is the spokesperson for the board, and we really just want to make sure that our message is heard.
So I'm gonna. It's just make it easier for me. I'll go finish this way, and then I'll turn that way. Okay? I'm sorry.
All right. My question is maybe slightly off topic, but it sort of ties into what Dennis Safran spoke in his brief presentation about the proposal to let illegal aliens vote. What safeguards, if any, are in place now which prevent unqualified voters from registering to vote and exercising a franchise which they don't have a right to? We've all heard horror stories of people registering their pets to vote. We all know that dead people vote, and sometimes in big numbers. And I'd like to know what safeguards does the Board of Elections have to prevent that? Is there any process whereby people who registrations come in and they're vetted as to who they are and whether they're eligible to vote or not?
Actually, one of the biggest criticisms of the Board of Elections is the structure of the place, and that it's, you know, this bipartisan stuff. And we've heard, you know, the DOI report came out in December, and it was critical of a lot of things. But the bipartisan nature of the agency is established by the New York State Constitution. So if anybody wants to change it, they have to go back and change the New York State Constitution. Now, it gets right to what you're saying, because what I've said and what I testified to the City Council, if I'm going to create mischief as the executive director, right? It's going to be blatant. Everybody's going to see it. I can't hide. I'm on, I'm on television. I'm in front of the City Council. So I could do a lot less harm at my level to the election process than the people that are processing the information at the front end of the process can do. So, for example, if somebody wanted to take a tray of voter registrations and throw them in the garbage, or put them into a locked closet until after Election Day, that's something that could happen, potentially. The safeguard against that is the bipartisan nature of the agency, because a Democrat and a Republican has to review each one of these registrations before it gets into the system. So that's our safeguard. It's the structure of the agency, and they have to vet the addresses and all that other information that they check it out. And it's got to be done in a bipartisan way.
How do they determine if the person's a citizen of the United States?
Well, they provide us the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. I'm not saying that the system is perfect, and I also know that where I see the bigger problem than people, because there are serious penalties associated with actual in-person voter fraud. The Presidential Commission report bears this out. The penalties are so high for actually going to the polling place to vote, so you're not really going to see much of that. Where the system fails throughout the country, not just in New York City, is more in the absentee process, because it would be harder to prove if you drop something in a mailbox than it would be to prove if you went into a place and voted or when you shouldn't. So, you know, there are laws that discourage people from doing it, but the system isn't perfect. But getting back to my point, where we have a bigger problem, as I see it, is in our inability to effectively get people off the books that no longer belong there. And so one of the things that we did after I came on, I was told there's something called the Social Security Debt Master File Index. And I was told by a couple of different sources within the agency that we can't subscribe to it. There's Federal Privacy Act issues. There's, oh no, they really don't want us to use that. So I didn't take no for an answer, and I called up. I've been in government long enough to know you don't call the 800 number, you try to get a real number. And I got a real number at the local office in the Social Security office in Manhattan. And I said, hey, I'm the executive director of the Board of Elections. I want to get this Social Security Debt Master File Index that everybody's telling me about. How do I go about do that? They says, well, you know, we're the Social Security Administration, but we don't administer the Social Security Debt Master File Index. It's administered by the Department of Commerce. I said, well, who do I got to get in touch with at the Department of Commerce to get this thing? They said, well, go on this website, Department of Commerce, and whatever. There's Joe Smith, and it was a 202, you know, number down in Washington. So I go, all right, I call. Hello, Joe Smith, Department of Commerce. I was like, I think the guy's name was Eddie, but we'll call him Joe for the purposes of the story. And I said, Joe, I need this Social Security Debt Master File. What do I got to do? He says, you got $1,800? I says, yeah, we got $1,800, $1,850. He goes, you can have it. All the debt records going back to 1930. 88 million records. And then we had a choice to update it weekly for $7,500 for the year, or update it monthly for $2,340 for the year. I decided to update it weekly for the first year to see, you know, how it went, and if we can scale it back to monthly, if that makes more sense next year, we'll do that. We're in the process of going through that information now. It's very labor intensive, but we expect that we're probably going to pull 60, 65,000 people off the rolls that have been dead for a long time. I had staff come in to my office and give me an update on what they're doing. So central office staff is doing Manhattan and Brooklyn to get it all under control because they're two unwieldy boroughs. And then once we get that done, then we're going to parse it out to Brooklyn, to Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. So I says, let me see an example of this. So they show it to me. 1892. 1894, 1897. There was 20 to 25 names on this piece of paper. Not one person had a date of birth after 1900. Now, I know, you know, longevity's getting there, and, you know, medicine's made advancements, you know, but I'm going to say that the people that were born in 1892 probably still aren't voting. You know. I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV. So, you know, so we know that there are spots in this process that need to be fixed. And we also learned, one of the things that we learned from the DOI report, not from the report itself, but from the aftermath of the report, was that one of the areas we have a problem with are middle initials and middle names, and people not using them consistently. So one of the big pushes that we want to do moving forward, and because anybody that has a teenager, I have a 19-year-old that goes to Hofstra, not too far from here, you know, they're very technologically savvy in a way that we never could have imagined being. We have to get electronic in terms of our voter registration, because when you factor in middle names and middle initials, and then add on top of that ethnically, you know, let's just say, you know, culturally specific names, longer names, multiple consonants one after the other, Asian names where the first name and the last name sometimes gets inverted by people who aren't familiar with those situations. People know how to spell their own name. People know whether they want to use their middle initial or not. And if we can get that information inputted into the system, put into an electronic queue, right? It doesn't go all the way into the system. It gets to a stopping point, right? And then still have it reviewed by the bipartisan team, we'll have a more accurate voter list. The more accurate the voter list is on the way in, the more accurate it will be on the way out when people move or people get arrested and are no longer eligible to vote, or if they pass away. So, you know, we have to embrace the technology, and that will help us weed out these folks that don't belong on the rolls.